December 1943. High above the gray clouds of Germany at 27,000 feet the air was thin and frozen. Captain Don Gentile of the 336th Fighter Squadron gripped the controls of his P-51 Mustang, his oxygen mask frosting over with every breath. Below him a formation of B-17 flying fortresses rumbled toward their target deep inside the Reich, and all around them the black blossoms of flak exploded in the air. Gentile's radio crackled. Bandits 10 o'clock high. A swarm of Messerschmitt Bf-109s dove out of the sun, their yellow noses flashing like fangs. The Germans had come to hunt, but they didn't yet know that the hunters had changed. Gentile pushed his throttle forward. The Merlin engine roared. And in that moment the legend of the Mustang was born. For years the skies over Europe belonged to the Luftwaffe. When the United States entered the war, its bombers, the B-17S and B-24S, could fly far, but their escorts could not. The P-47 Thunderbolt and the P-38 Lightning were formidable but limited. They couldn't follow the bombers deep into Germany. That meant over cities like Regensburg, Schweinfurt and Berlin the bombers were a lone easy prey for seasoned German aces. Between 1942 and 1943 the 8th Air Force lost over 20,000 airmen. Entire formations were wiped from the sky. American morale was breaking. Even the Germans joked that the Luftwaffe's best ally was the short range of American fighters. The Allies needed a miracle. And that miracle arrived from an unexpected place. In 1940 the British Royal Air Force had approached the North American Aviation Company asking them to build fighters for their desperate war effort. Instead of copying an existing design, the engineers Edgar Schmud, Ray Rice and James Kindleberger created something entirely new. They built a sleek laminar flow wing that cut through the air with unmatched efficiency. They gave it a deep fuselage for fuel, a wide-set landing gear for stability, and a new vision, speed and endurance together. The prototype, the NA-73X, first flew in October 1940. It was fast, agile but underpowered. Its Allison engine couldn't breathe above 15,000 feet. Then came the transformation. The British fitted it with the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, the same powerplant that roared in the Spitfire Mk9. The result was nothing short of revolutionary. A fighter that could climb higher, fly faster and most importantly escort bombers all the way to Berlin and back. The P-51 Mustang was born. By late 1943 the new Mustangs arrived in Europe, sleek, silver and deadly. To the German pilots they were just another enemy plane until they met them in the sky. At first they laughed. They'd heard the Americans couldn't build fighters to match the Luftwaffe's elite. But that arrogance would soon cost them the war in the air. The Luftwaffe Jägerschwader squadrons led by legendary aces like Adolf Galland and Erich Hartmann faced a new enemy they didn't understand. The P-51 could dive faster than the Bf-109 and turn tighter than the Fw-190. It could stay in the air for over 6 hours, a nightmare for any German pilot trying to run home. Gentile and his wingmen would later recall the moment they realized it. We could go wherever we wanted and they couldn't shake us off. The hunters had become the hunted. January 1944. The 8th Air Force launched a daylight bombing raid on Brunswick. Hundreds of bombers filled the skies, and this time the Mustangs went with them all the way. When the German interceptors came they met a wall of silver wings. The air became chaos. Engines screamed, tracers carved red lines through the clouds. Captain Gentile dove through a formation of Bf-109s firing short deadly bursts. 2 went down before he pulled back into the sun. Another American pilot, Major James Howard, flying alone over Ostravsleben, faced 30 enemy planes and kept fighting for more than half an hour. He was awarded the Medal of Honor. By February the once invincible Luftwaffe was bleeding. American pilots called it the Big Week. In 7 days they destroyed over 600 German fighters and crippled the aircraft industry. For the first time the skies over Germany were no longer safe for the Reich. By mid-1944 the P-51 Mustang was everywhere. It escorted bombers deep into enemy territory, swept the skies clean and attacked airfields on the ground. Even the feared Me-262 jet fighters couldn't change the tide. The Luftwaffe was dying not from lack of courage but from exhaustion. The German aces who once mocked the Americans were gone, replaced by young untrained boys. When D-Day came in June 1944, the Allies owned the skies. The Mustangs flew above the beaches, cutting down anything that dared to rise. By the war's end, P-51 pilots had destroyed over 4,900 enemy aircraft, more than any other Allied fighter in Europe. They were fast, they were beautiful, they were lethal. As General Dwight D. Eisenhower later said, "The Mustang was the plane that won the air war over Europe." When the war ended, many of the Mustangs were scrapped, sold, or forgotten, but their legacy never faded. For the men who flew them, the memory remained: the roar of the Merlin, the cold at 30,000 feet, the flash of sunlight on a silver wing. The P-51 was more than a machine, it was a promise that the tide could turn, that courage and innovation could defeat even the greatest of enemies. Today, restored Mustangs still fly at airshows, their engines singing the same fierce song that once echoed over Europe. A song of freedom, a song of triumph, a song for every man who took to the sky and never came home. The Germans once laughed at it, but in the end it was the sound that silenced them. And yet the story of the Mustang does not end in silence. It continues in every story told by the men who survived, and every photograph preserved in faded tones and film grain. In hangars across the world, mechanics and veterans still run their hands along the smooth metal skin of the plane that carried them through fire and sky. They speak softly about friends who never came back, about engines that roared like thunder, about the strange beauty of flight in war. The P-51 became a symbol not only of victory but of endurance, of what happens when innovation meets necessity and when courage meets destiny. When historians look back at the air war over Europe, they no longer see just battles and numbers, they see transformation, they see a moment when technology and humanity collided and changed the course of history. The Mustang was not the most advanced aircraft ever built, nor the most heavily armed. It was the right plane at the right moment, guided by the right men. It turned fear into resolve, weakness into strength, and desperation into dominance. In the quiet of museums, its polished aluminum gleams beneath soft light. The name on the side often says Shangri-La, Old Crow, or Glamorous Glen. They are more than paint, they are memorials. The roar of the Merlin echoes faintly in memory, a ghost of history carried on the wind. To those who fought the air war, the Mustang was freedom incarnate. It was the feeling of chasing the horizon, knowing that somewhere ahead lay danger and duty. It was the bond between pilot and machine, forged in speed and survival. And for every German pilot who once laughed at its strange design, there came a moment of realization in the sky when they saw it closing in from the sun, when they understood that the tide had turned. No words were needed then, the sky itself declared it. The P-51 Mustang was no longer a newcomer, it was the master of the air. From the frozen fields of Norway to the burning oil refineries of Ploiești, from the industrial heart of Germany to the beaches of Normandy, its shadow crossed every battlefield. Each mission etched another chapter into the story of the war, until finally there were no more enemies left to chase, no more skies to claim. When peace returned and the pilots went home, they carried that sound with them, the hum of the propeller, the steady rhythm of hope beating through metal and man alike. Even decades later, when those same men grew old, their eyes still lifted to the sky at the sound of a distant engine, and for a moment they were there again, 27,000 feet above a Europe at war, flying a silver bird that would change the world. The Mustang was not just an aircraft, it was the beating heart of a generation. A symbol that in the darkest times humanity could still rise defiant, still build something that could soar. And so its legacy endures, not in museums or documentaries alone, but in the belief that courage and ingenuity can shape destiny. The Germans laughed at first, but in the end the laughter faded, replaced by awe, respect, and silence. And in that silence you can still hear it, faint but eternal. The whisper of a Merlin engine echoing across the sky. The sound of victory.